Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. We're a week into the Olympics and there's a warning that these games could be the hottest ever held. Extreme heat is nothing new in Tokyo, but experts say the role of human-induced climate change is making it worse. Now, according to the Japanese Meteorological Agency, Japan, and more specifically Tokyo, is warming much faster than the rest of the planet. The mean temperature in the country's capital has increased by 2.86 degrees since 1900. That's nearly 3 times faster than the world's average. And part of the reason Tokyo experiences such high temperatures is because of the urban heat island effect. This is where an urban area is significantly warmer than its surrounding rural areas due to heat being created by all the people, transport and buildings. It means that during the night, the surface of the largely urbanised Tokyo area releases heat that's been trapped during the day, preventing the city from cooling. Now, heat waves are a natural part of the climate system. However, human-induced global warming is making them stronger and more frequent. Scientists predict that extremely hot temperatures in Japan will become the new normal if the world's temperature increases by 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Now, in a sporting context, a hot and humid environment can represent a risk to the performance and health of spectators, officials and, of course, athletes. As Sky's Tom Parmenter reports from Tokyo.
It is sweltering, and every outdoor sport is feeling it. We've had athletes collapsing and some events moved away from the middle of the day.
We got here, it was a bit of a shock, I'm not going to lie, but yeah, slowly getting used to it.
At home we were in greenhouses, hot pods, just getting a sweat on with layers as well, face masks, training face masks. So as soon as we got here, it definitely felt like that.
As much as the heat, the humidity is sapping their strength.
It is punishing out there, and each of them have to carefully manage it, so there's more drinks, more breaks. They could easily overcook themselves.
This was Johnny Brownlee's preparation chamber in his conservatory in Yorkshire. Yes, that is sweat. But when it's for real, there is no escape. It's not an unusually hot summer in Tokyo, but researchers here have calculated that the average temperature has increased faster here than in other parts of the world, up 3 degrees over the past century. Now, with the athletics underway, the middle and long-distance runners have to find their climate control.
It's just so much harder, stress on the body, on the heart rate, everything is just more increased. And it's actually just the perception of not being able to cool down as well, which is quite difficult to... So not only is it physically, I think mentally sometimes you need to be, I suppose, reassured that you're not just going to implode.
The hot rain that sometimes drops in doesn't clear the humidity.
We're on the 28th floor and you can't see any of Tokyo now.
And then it clears again. The Midsummer Games here are tough, but the heat is just one of the many challenges. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Tokyo.
Well, joining me now is Melissa Wilson, British rower and member of Champions for Earth. Melissa, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, it's just 3 years ago that a heatwave in Japan claimed the lives of more than 1,000 people. Thousands were hospitalised again last summer. How much of a concern was the weather and the heat for athletes competing at Tokyo?
Yeah, a huge concern, both for the athletes and for their coaching teams and physiology teams behind them. As we heard from some of the long-distance runners just then, people have been in heat chambers. I know the sailing squads, the hockey teams have been looking at that. And Alice Deering in the open water, she's preparing for swimming in water that over 10 kilometres that is going to be at least 29 degrees. So she's been in these tanks of hot water trying to train and acclimatise just to face the competition that she's going to have this summer.
And how much does climate change concern you when it comes to competing? Your sport, an outdoor event, rowing, it's not just heat that impacts you, but also potentially extreme weather, which we're seeing a lot more of.
Yeah, absolutely. We had 2 days of racing postponed because of a typhoon that came in. And I was talking to one of the Tokyo rowers this morning. He came away with the silver medal, and he was saying in terms of heat, just for their half-hour training sessions, which is really quite a light load, easy, steady state, they were losing up to 2 litres of water just in that half-hour period in their training in the week leading up to the games. So it's definitely something that will weigh on the minds of these athletes, and especially when they're trying to make strategic decisions as well in the course of a rowing race, it's hard to keep that clarity of thought when your body physiologically is under such extreme pressures.
Well, Melissa, we have really appreciated having your thoughts today. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. In today's other climate news, enough ice melted in Greenland to cover Florida with 2 inches of water in just a day. The World Meteorological Organization say the country lost more than 8.5 billion tonnes of surface mass from an ice melt on Tuesday. Scientists predict Greenland's ice melt will raise sea levels between 2 and 10 centimetres by the end of the century, putting coastal cities at risk of flooding. Environmentalists say pollution has caused this lagoon in Argentina to turn pink. Look at that. The pink hue is thought to be caused by waste sodium sulfite used by fish farms to clean shrimp. Now, while the striking shade of pink may look pretty, water treatment specialists say the contamination is killing the chance of any kind of life surviving in the water. And the Natural History Museum has opened a new exhibition on the consequences of climate change and the potential solutions. Director Doug Gurr told Sky News the museum will walk the walk on its promise to reach net zero by 2035. And to find out more, you can listen to the interview with Mr. Gurr on this week's episode of Climate Cast, and you can find that wherever you normally get your podcasts. Countries in Africa are being asked to make big climate commitments ahead of the COP26 summit in November. Now, these include reducing emissions and investment in renewable energy in order to keep the level of global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now, according to the United Nations, Africa is the continent most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Countries there face a wide range of impacts, including increased drought and floods, as well as decreasing food production and loss of biodiversity. But despite being so vulnerable to the effects of climate change, Africa is not a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. You can see here emissions from regions worldwide, from 1965 all the way through to 2020. And Asia-Pacific is by far the biggest contributor in recent years, with China alone responsible for nearly 60% of those, followed by North America and then Europe. In comparison, Africa has consistently contributed a very small percentage of CO2 emissions. The presidents of Kenya and Malawi have spoken to Sky News and explained what they think the pressing issues are ahead of COP26.
We were all in Paris a few years ago. The enormous pledges for adaptation and mitigation that were made. And here we are now heading to Glasgow, with very few of those commitments actually lived upon. We need to be able to get to a situation where we walk the talk and do what we say. And my hope and my prayer is that moving into Glasgow, we are going to get more realism, and that is why I'm saying we need all parties at the table.
This issue of climate change has affected us, and irregular rain patterns have affected us badly, but through it all, we are having to take measures where food sufficiency becomes foremost.
Let's bring in our Africa correspondent, John Sparks. John, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, of course, one of the big things is food security. Can you put into context for us how climate change is impacting people's lives in Africa already?
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting, isn't it, Sally? Food security, probably not the first thing you think of in the developed world when you talk about climate change, but it sure is here in Africa. The fact is, tens of millions of people on the continent live life on the edge. They live a hand-to-mouth existence. And when weather patterns change, people go hungry. And we saw that in South Sudan recently, that rains had washed out hundreds of kilometers of prime farmland, and that water had been accumulating since 2018. Nobody had seen anything like it. And in Madagascar, currently, the World Food Programme is saying that entire communities are teetering on the edge of starvation after a severe 2-year drought. Really serious problem. And as a consequence, the world's poorest countries, they want loans and grants to help fight and adapt to climate change. And they're becoming increasingly vocal about it as well. But the developed world still haven't met their commitments in terms of $100 billion of climate finance. And that was a target that was set back in 2009. So there sure is a lot to do.
There certainly is. John, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Staying in Africa now, because tomorrow is World Rangers Day, a day to recognise the work being done to conserve the environment. Now, Team Lioness is one of Kenya's first all-female wildlife ranger units. The group used their relationships with Maasai women in the area to protect their national park from harm.
What is your name?
My name is Kirichi Lakara, Team Lioness. It was my vision to come and protect wildlife in the future. We wake up at 5 a.m. We go for morning run. After we take bath, we take tea, then we arrange ourselves for the patrol.
Here we see a footprint of a zebra.
Climate change can lead to drought, and this drought can cause some wildlife like lions and elephants to change their position. They can move from the national park to around the communities in search of water and pastures. Animals like lion can enter into bomas, they kill their livestock, and this leads to human-wildlife conflict.
Then if they go to interact with ladies in our community, they can't get information easily.
This is a horn of an antelope. Maybe it has broke when they are fighting with each other.
For us as ladies, we can branch into the community and get information easily because we live with them like our mothers, our sisters. So it is very easy for us to interact with them and to get information.
I hope that in the future, many women will be empowered, and I'm hopeful for the future of the land that I am protecting. I am hoping that maybe deforestation will not be there because we protect all species of wildlife and plants also.
And finally, a little happy news. Trail cameras have captured footage of the first baby beaver born in Norfolk for 600 years. Now, the beaver, known as a kit, was spotted swimming at Wild Ken Hill, a stretch of land being restored to its natural state. Beavers, once native to Norfolk, have been reintroduced to the area because their dams create ponds and streams, in turn restoring local wetlands. Well, that's everything from us for this week. Don't forget, you can keep up with all the climate news over the weekend on our website. Just head to skynews.com/climate. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I'll see you next week.